Hello and welcome to the second episode in this year's Brief History Spooky Season. Today, we're traveling to Atchison, Kansas, to a 2-story, 3-bedroom home located at 508 North 2nd Street. It is claimed that the home is host to the spirit of a young girl who died within the house at the turn of the century, but potentially is also occupied by other spirits, including one that many believe to be a demonic entity. Strange happenings and occurrences have surrounded the house for much of its history, culminating in some strangely violent attacks towards the owners in the early 1990s. The house is claimed to be the most haunted house in America. This is a brief history of the Sallie House. As always, this episode of A Brief History may contain graphic content and is not suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Today, we'll be building an interpretation of the Sallie House in The Sims 4, using both interior and exterior reference photos as well as floor plans. The Sallie House in Atchison, Kansas was built in the mid-1800s, but the paranormal occurrences didn't begin immediately. While there is no actual record of Sallie existing, the legend of the home perseveres. The house was occupied by Dr. Charles Finney at the turn of the century, and it was not only his home, but also the location where he practiced medicine. The legend of Sallie herself begins in 1906, when Dr. Finney was awoken in the middle of the night by Sallie's mother. Dr. Finney found that Sallie was intensely sick, and after examination, came to the conclusion that her appendix needed to be removed. Dr. Finney prepped Sallie as best he could for the surgery, but ultimately began operating before the anesthesia could become fully effective. During the surgery, Sallie suddenly stopped vocalizing her pain and went limp and pale, eventually dying on the operating table. In other stories, it is said that Sallie's appendix simply burst before Dr. Finney could remove it, causing the death of the child. After the alleged death of Sallie, strange occurrences began to happen around the house. Picture frames being turned upside down, ghost sightings, and strange noises. All fairly standard for a house one would assume was haunted. Though it was noticed that the ghost, presumed to be young Sallie herself, had a propensity for acting out against men. It is thought that Sallie targeted men due to what had happened in her final moments with Dr. Finney. The Finney family resided in the home for nearly a century before either selling it or renting it out to new occupants. For 40 years after the Finneys left the home, a single woman lived there, experiencing no or minimal activity within the house. But in 1993, that would all change when a young family consisting of Tony and Deborah Pickman moved into the house while expecting their first son to be named Taylor. The Pickmans had no grace period and began noticing activity within the home from the moment they moved in. Upon moving in, the couple made one of the bedrooms upstairs into a nursery and quickly began making the house their home. The newborn baby's room seemed to become an immediate focus for whatever entities were living in the house. Neighbors would frequently ask why the couple left the nursery lights on all night long. Dolls would be taken down from shelves and placed in perfect circles on the nursery floor. Electronics would seemingly turn off when they got close to the nursery, and noises would be frequently heard coming from the room. Soon after, it seemed that Tony was becoming the target of the spirit or spirits within the home. After returning home from work on Halloween, their first year in the home, Tony was standing in the kitchen getting himself a drink when he saw a young girl standing there staring at him. Startled from the unexpected visitor, Tony dropped his drink, shattering the glass and seemingly the little girl, and he ran upstairs to his wife Deborah screaming, "I saw her! I saw her!" The family dog began growling at seemingly nothing, and the strange occurrences continued in the nursery, even after moving their newborn to another room. The activity became more frequent and more violent. The violence of some of these instances led many people to believe that either in addition to Sallie, or in lieu of Sallie, there was a demonic presence in the house that was taking the form of a young girl. The couple called the producers of the TV show Sightings and invited them to investigate the home. A number of things were noticed by the film crew, and after the crew left, the activity only grew worse. The couple had seemingly upset their ghostly housemates by inviting this paranormal crew to their house. Fires were started throughout the home with seemingly no cause. The former operating area of Dr. Finney would become cold, and Tony would end up with scratches along his arms and chest on more than one occasion. In one instance, Tony recalled dreaming about being pulled from his bed by a little girl, and awoke the next morning with fingerprint-shaped burn marks on his arm. For 2 years, the couple tried to make peace with whatever entities were in the home, buying gifts and toys meant for the little girl they assumed to be Sallie. But the attacks continued, and ultimately the couple left the home, unable to cope with what was happening to them. The Pickmans, however, have been very involved with the Sallie home since they left, returning a decade later with psychic investigators to check out the home. While the first few times the couple returned to the house showed no activity, they returned again, and this time, Tony was thrown into a door and unable to move, as though he were pinned to the door by some unseen force. Investigators noticed cold spots, objects moving around the home, lights turning on and off by themselves, and even rocks being thrown at individuals who dared to enter the basement, which many believe to have been home to rituals that may have invoked the presence of the demonic entity. The activity in the house is so powerful that there have been many paranormal investigators who have simply left before completing their investigations due to the violent and terrifying nature of the house. The Sallie House is still standing and was put for sale in 2016 by the current owners for $1 million, being sold specifically as a tourist attraction. The house, to this day, allows rental by the night or by the hour for self-guided tours, or for the brave people who believe that they can last a night in the house. There have been many investigations of the Sallie home, and it has been featured on TV shows and documentaries such as Unsolved Mysteries, a Travel Channel show called Most Haunted Town, and also BuzzFeed Unsolved. Deborah Pickman also wrote a book cataloging her and her family's experiences in the home, called The Sallie House Haunting, a True Story. Of course, investigators have seemingly found that the house is not only occupied by a young girl and what is presumed to be a demonic entity, but also by family members of the original owners, the Finneys, including a young woman thought to be Joanna Barnes, who was a relative of Dr. Finney and also lived next door to the home. Claims of sightings of a former Civil War soldier, a prankster or poltergeist, and a young boy who died just a year after Sallie was claimed to have died have also been seen. Claims of sightings also include that of a former Civil War soldier, a prankster or poltergeist type spirit, and a young boy who was said to have died just a year after Sallie had died. What do you think about the Sallie House? Have you visited? Would you visit? Do you think that you could last the night? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for this episode of A Brief History. Thank you to my patrons who support this series. You are much appreciated. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.